We have big breaking news out of the Montreal Canadiens organization. Dominique Ducharme, the head coach, has been relieved of his duties. Who will take over? What does this mean for the team going forward? We'll discuss that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some breaking news out of the Montreal Canadiens organization. Dominique Ducharme, head coach of the Montreal Canadiens, has been officially relieved of his duty pretty much 1 year after being hired as head coach, taking over for Claude Julien last year. Of course, Dominique Ducharme and the Montreal Canadiens are having an extremely tough, really historically bad season right now in Montreal. And obviously, even though Dominique Ducharme was probably expecting, and I think the fans were expecting him to at least finish out the season, I think after a really embarrassing, terrible 7-1 loss against New Jersey last night, the Devils are not a team that's very high in the standings. They're not having a good year themselves. And when they can embarrass Montreal that badly, I think they felt like they had no choice but to make a move here, even though they had already publicly stated that Ducharme would finish out the year. I think most people expected Jeff Gordon and Ken Hughes to replace Dominique Ducharme with their own head coach, somebody who they wanted to kind of take over moving forward here in the offseason. That's what I think a lot of us kind of predicted, but I'm not sure that really that they've seen things going this badly, this quickly. I know there's a lot of Montreal fans I've seen on social media been very critical of Ducharme's work as head coach and been calling for a change. I know there's some supporters that don't feel this is his fault. There seems to be a little bit of divide amongst the fan base in that regard, which is not surprising. That seems to always be the case when any kind of significant move is made like that. I mean, Dominique Ducharme, if you take a look at it, he coached 83 regular season hockey games. So, 82 regular season games scheduled on a full season, even though it's parts of 2 years. He basically coached the equivalent of 1 year, and his record really isn't all that good. He has a record of 23, 46, and 14. That's really subpar for a team that went to the finals last year. I know a lot of people that'll be critical of Montreal were not optimistic they'd be able to carry on that success this year. A lot of people seem to think that, a hot Carey Price and some opportunistic play from some other guys is kind of what got them to the finals. But really this team looked like they were on pace to maybe not necessarily be a Stanley Cup contender year after year, but we didn't expect them to bottom out this badly. They've also had a ton of adversity this year. You got to remember, all of a sudden you take away Shea Weber out of the mix, career likely over. Carey Price has not played at all this season. They've had numerous other players miss significant time. Paul Byron's been out for a bulk of the season. Brendan Gallagher has missed significant time. You've seen other guys too, like Toffoli and Anderson be out for periods of time. Jeff Petrie seems like he doesn't want to play anymore, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Petrie, but he's having the worst year of his career, and a lot of it seems to be the lack of not wanting to be there. At least that's how it appears to me. So there's a lot of other factors that the coach can't control. So I will cut Ducharme a little bit of slack, but at the same time, like I said, with what he's got to work with, I know some people feel like he keeps going to the same things over and over again, not making changes when things that he's trying are clearly not working out. But it's not all on him. I think this was an experiment that was doomed to fail pretty much from the beginning, especially once we saw Marc Bergevin be relieved. I think it was inevitable that this was going to happen and just happened sooner than most of us kind of thought. Now, as far as who replaces him, we don't know the answer to that question just yet. The Montreal Canadiens are expected to announce his head coaching replacement sometime later today. It was reported that other assistant coaches that you would think would be in the mix for taking over as head coach, at least on an interim basis, like an Alex Burrows or a Luke Richardson, would be in the mix. But the press release from the Habs indicate that those assistant coaches their roles remain unchanged. So you kind of wonder if they're not in the mix and that maybe it is somebody outside coming in. At least that's what it sounds like. If they decide to announce that Richardson or Burrows is interim for the rest of the year, I don't think I'd be overly shocked, but based on the way this press release was worded, I think now I would be. Who could the candidate be? Well, it could be a number of people. We know that the Montreal Canadiens and their organization believe that the coach and the GM should be able to communicate with the Montreal media and its fans en français. We know that. So I would think that the odds of it being a French-speaking coach very, very high. I mean, we've seen it happen before. I believe it was Randy Kennyworth. That didn't go over very well. It was short-lived. Didn't get great acceptance. And, I mean, there's other reasons that went into that too. But still, I think it's going to be a French-speaking coach. If you look at not only who's got experience, who's available, who's connected to Gorton and Hughes, there's some options that I've listed here, as well as some other coaches that, I mean, I've seen other media members that I mentioned that could be in the mix too. You have to think a guy like Guy Boucher, who's coached twice in the NHL, once with the Lightning, once with the Senators. He's the kind of coach that seemed, at least in his prior stints, had a lot of success, but the success comes early and over time. It seems like he's the kind of coach that kind of wears on you, and, you know, after 2-3 years, it's time for a change. I mean, ideally, you don't really want that, but I do believe he has some connections that Kent Hughes. I believe they know each other quite well, so maybe he'll be considered. I don't know. Another name to look out for who's French-speaking, and we know the Habs also have a habit of recycling coaches. I know we have a new regime in place right now, so maybe we won't see that, but some connection to Gorton from his time in the Rangers organization. What about Alain Vigneault? He was recently relieved of his duties with the Philadelphia Flyers earlier this year. He's available. He speaks French. He knows the Habs organization well. Could that be a possibility? I don't know. I mean, obviously, Michel Therrien's been out there. I don't know if he's connected to either of those guys. I wouldn't think Therrien, he's less likely. He hasn't coached as a head coach in a lot longer, so I would think it'd be a less likely scenario. Some other names out there. What about Patrick Waugh? He recently was involved with interviews when it comes to the general manager position, so he likely would have got to know Gorton well. I would be surprised if this happened. I think from an entertainment perspective, just from a hockey fan or an outsider looking in, it'd be interesting. I don't know if Habs fans really want that. Patrick Waugh seems to be the kind of guy, at least based on his prior record. People can always change, but based on how things went in Colorado, I would be surprised if he was the head coach, because I think whenever that opportunity comes for Patrick, if it does in the NHL in the future, it's going to want a little bit more authority and a little bit more control. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to get that in this situation, so I would be surprised if it's him, but theoretically, he's somebody connected to the organization, recently interviewed with them, former player, speaks French, checks a lot of the other boxes. I just don't know if the personality really fits what they want there. Benoit Gros is another guy that's been mentioned. Obviously, expected to get an opportunity here at some point too. You got to think there's probably some others out there as well, but it does sound like there's a pretty good chance it is an outsider coming in, but that's just my interpretation of the press release. Certainly could be wrong on that. Only time will tell. We should know the answer to that. I would assume sometime in the next few hours. Now, another name that I've seen fans speculating about on social media was Paul Maurice, of course, a really solid head coach. Recently stepped down from his job with Winnipeg. For a man who's not that old, he's got a long coaching career because he really got started at a super young age. I don't know if he fits the bill. Great coach. And really, if they weren't fixated on the French component being important, maybe, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe Paul Maurice speaks French, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'd be surprised there. I don't see a connection to either of the other guys, but I know he is a good coach, and he would be a good candidate. Also not quite clear if he's ready to come back yet. We saw Travis Green be relieved in Vancouver earlier this year. Again, somebody who is known as a good coach, not sure he's a good fit for that organization, that market, but still, somebody else that's out there, I guess, looking for work. But to me, I honestly think Boucher, Vigneault, Waugh, Gros, they're probably, the most likely. And you never know. There could be other Habs connections here that could even come back, or that were previously linked to the organization. Could be Carbonneau. You just never know, right? They seem to be fond of bringing back people from the past. So that's enough speculating on my part. I really have no idea who it's going to be. Those are the names I've heard tossed around in various circles online of media members and NHL insiders. We should know here in a matter of time, a few hours probably, before we have an announcement. So we'll again put up a video discussing that when that news is announced. So certainly stay tuned. Let me know your thoughts on Ducharme being let go. Is this fair? Should they have waited? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and then we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.